Good evening, good evening, good evening. This is going to be a show, real show tonight. Yeah, this is some hard work tonight. So I want to start off with some news. And this is beautifully timed. If anybody knows, this was a postponed show. It was due to be done in March, but circumstances had it. I had a birth at that time, and so I could not attend to this conversation. So here we are at the rescheduled version. And I want to start off with the news. I think it's perfectly timed with this because yesterday was Windrush Day. Now, it says that the Windrush generation moved to tears as monument unveiled in London. Yeah. Members of the Windrush generation have been moved to tears by a new national monument that pays tribute to their ambition, courage, and contribution to Britain. The artist behind the sculpture has said. Basil Watson, permanent monument to the Windrush pioneers who arrived in Britain after the Second World War, was unveiled at Waterloo Station in London on Wednesday. The statue, backed by £1 million of pounds of government funding, portrays three figures: a man, a woman, and a child, dressed in their Sunday best, climbing a mountain of suitcases hand in hand. I kind of want to stop it there. I'm a bit all over the place with the Windrush conversation because I have my ups and downs with that. It's a very mixed feeling, a mixed bag for me, because these are all well and good, but we're dealing with the Windrush generation. They came with ambition, they came with their vision in mind, and and some of them really worked really hard to increase their life and their value, of course, but we're also having to deal with the reality of, the Windrush scandal. We're still dealing with compensation issues around it. We're still dealing with, fighting against deportation. So, no monument is going to take away what is actually going on and the impact of racism on our elders. Yeah, I know that my grandmother is a Windrush. She's passed now. But I know that if she had been in a position where, her status here was up for question, that would have done it. Yeah, if she hadn't passed before, that would have done it. She put her blood, sweat, and tears into this thing. So, when I hear the Windrush, I appreciate it. I want to value it. I want to honor it. And there, of course, it's meant to be honored. But it's a bittersweet, for me. Yeah, and there's other dynamics. A lot of our Windrush generation, we have to understand that there was an impact. Racism has an impact, and where does that go? So tonight we're going to explore some of that this evening. So I want to get to some announcements. Yes, I do want to get into some announcements because some of you already know. If you don't know already, that Grietchinieri is going to be doing her last Iniagu storytelling event this year. Yeah, and so if you haven't been before, this is an opportunity for you to go if you haven't been before. It is an amazing experience. So I'm hoping this will pop up for you. Yes, it's an amazing experience, and there's a possibility of a discount, a 12% discount for groups of 12 or more. So engage in that. home education groups and supplementary schools as well. So tell a friend to tell a friend. It's a really important event, a beautiful event. If you've never experienced village life, yeah, that's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. Yeah, this is it. Yeah, this is the closest. Yeah, you're going to get to it, and you're going to feel refreshed, revitalized, yeah, enriched by it. Yeah. So I do want to share that with you because I think it's really important. And I also want to share. There's another screen I want to share with you as well, just to give you a sense of the event as well for you. Yeah, so if you haven't, you can go and book tickets. There's still tickets available, so don't hesitate to go on to shantychi.com and you can check them out there, get the tickets there for that. So the Inaugural 2022 says farewell to griotchinery, celebrate the majestic vibrations conjured annually for the last 12 years. Griot will establish a permanent storytelling village in the motherland in 2023. So we honor the spirit of Winnie Madzikele Mandela as we celebrate and perform ceremonies of freedom. So I'll be doing a workshop over that time. I'll be doing a couple of days workshops there and celebrating that. And if you know anything about a bit of my story, I had the opportunity of meeting Winnie Mandela as well in 2003. So I'll be able to share some of that with you. So it's Monday the 25th to Friday the 29th of July. It's a 5-day retreat, yeah, as Willowbrook Farm, Hampton Gate, Kidlington, OX5 2QQ. So if you are interested in going, do get your skates on. You know, July is around the corner, yeah, so book your tickets for that. And you know, and if you haven't been, if you're thinking about it, you know, and you've got children with you, especially children, yeah, if your children haven't experienced something like this, it's going to be so, I can only call it magical for them. And the reason why I say that is because they are free. Yeah, they have experienced a level of freedom that you don't experience inside of this city life as we do here. So yeah, so here you are. This is I'll be there on that date over that period of time as well. All right, so I do want to also now get into this evening with you, and I want to actually start with sharing our guests, you know, specialist areas. And I say that because the bio won't even give her credit, enough credit. Yeah, so I just want you to get a sense of who we have tonight and what they do. Yeah, if you haven't engaged in this kind of work, you know, conversations around intergenerational healing, this is the conversation tonight. Yeah, share it with your friends, get involved in this conversation. Yeah, the areas are specialist areas. I'm not sure if you can see that in the same way I can, so I am going to read it off for you. Areas are couples counseling, separation and divorce anxieties, grief and loss counseling, family support, difficult mother and daughter relationships, race-based trauma, menopausal women concerns, elderly, neglected and Black, therapeutic interventions with foster carers, foster families and looked after children, female victims of sexual abuse, victims of domestic violence and controlling relationships, attachment difficulties, sibling rivalry and ambivalence, ADHD, ODD and challenging behaviors, relationship difficulties, anger management, childhood difficulties, intergenerational trauma, providing therapeutic intervention and support to Black and minority ethnic individuals, as well as refugee and asylum seeking individuals, domestic violence recovery. Yeah, so that's who we have in the building this evening. I just want you to get that. Yeah, this is it. Okay, so I'm going to start off with our sister's bio this evening, and just so that you get a sense of the work she's done and what she's doing now. Okay, so Marlene Daley. Marlene is a child, adolescent, and family psychodynamic psychotherapist, specialising in working with looked after children suffering from trauma arising from early attachment and disconnect. She has over 30 years experience of working with young people with behavioural and special needs, including autism, vulnerable and disadvantaged families, victims of domestic violence and sexual abuse, and those who are stuck as a result of traumatic experiences. Marlene also specialises in supporting women who are struggling with the physiological impact of menopause, the psychological impact of menopause, women who need support with grief, loss, and women who are looking for happiness under the guise of beginning to realign themselves with their identity and deconstructing their mindset. Marlene is passionate about empowering women who have lost their voice, and for many years she has specialized in facilitating interactive, thought-provoking workshops and healing groups under her W is for Women umbrella at her sanctuary by the sea in Broadstairs, Kent. Yeah, and that's at integrated thinking therapies.co.uk. So I just want you to really get a sense of who we have in the building this evening, because this is a really, I came across this work actually, and I share it with you because I came across this work in, I think it was March, April last year during the lockdown. And, during those times, everybody, was different groups was popping up and everything else. And this came up on one of the groups. And I was like, oh, wow, this is interesting. And this is an area close to my heart because my relationship with my own mother wasn't always, and isn't always the way, in the world of motherhood and those dynamics. It's not always the way I'd like it to be. Yeah. So I had to do a lot of work and do a lot of inner work on myself. And over the years, anybody who knows me knows I love doing the work on myself. But what I loved about this work, healing the mother wound, it was central, it was core. And, our relationships, we know, we hear about it enough, but we know enough about, the foundation has an impact. Yeah. So we're going to uncover some of that tonight. We're going to, discover what her work is really about. And so, in the conversation around a proverb for this evening, and we are looking to bridge the generational gap. And actually, out of doing this work with Marlene, she doesn't know this, she can hear me in the background, but she doesn't know this. I'm about to tell you that Amahi Ena Ike was inspired by doing that work. Yeah, so if you went to Amahi Ena Ike last year, you'll know that, we're doing another one in August 28th. So put that in your diary. I'll get back to you on those details. But it means it definitely shows in when you do the work. Yeah, so, I am fortunate that I've come across some wonderful individuals during the lockdown space and some wonderful individuals in life. And so therefore it's been able to assist me, especially dealing with women. Yeah, and women, you know what I'm talking about. Let's not pretend. Yeah, my saying is always about women, girls compete, women empower. Yeah, I don't do, if you want to compete, go for it. Yeah, knock yourself out. Yeah, I'm not playing. Yeah, I don't need to. Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, we're comfortable. I'm comfortable in my own skin, and there's enough for everyone, and that's it. Yeah. So, without further ado, I'm going to give you the proverb. And the proverb for tonight is: children are the reward of life. But also another proverb that struck with me tonight: patience is the mother of a beautiful child. Yeah. So with that, I'm going to introduce our guest this evening, Marlene. If you could come in. Greetings.
Greetings, Sister Muck. I'm so pleased to be here.
Thank you. Let me just turn up the volume on this thing. Right, hold on. Right, here I am. Okay, so much to say, and I'm so glad to have you on. I'm so excited to have you on. Actually, I'm beaming, as you can see, because I know that this work. I know a lot of women, and there are men. Let's not assume that men are not experiencing this too. Yeah, we're discussing women tonight, but really, we're discussing, the mother healing across the board. Yeah. But women, I know a lot of women in power, women in, very powerful roles, or women who are just very high frequency females, who find themselves banging heads with their mother. Yeah. And I know that I went through my own version of events. I came through a family who were, there was a level of consciousness, but Christianity was also playing a major part. Yeah. And so when I tipped the balance some when I decided that, Christianity is not for me. And, being a black sheep, I'm comfortable with it now, but I wasn't always comfortable with it. Yeah, I wasn't. It used to grate on me, like, come on, like, but again, I'm the middle child. And so, often in a middle child setting, they always want to find their own way. Yeah. So, and I've learned over the time, I've learned about birth order, and those things have assisted me as well in going, okay, you know what? And I look at my middle child now, and he's so much like I am. Yeah. He gets some leverage because he's a middle child. And we've had conversations. He even talks about it. We've had a conversation about, how he feels, the oldest one is 22, the youngest one is 8, and where he fits. And he asked me once, he said to me, this was a few weeks ago, he talks about what his purpose was, yeah, inside the family. Yeah. And I thought it was a really big conversation because we talk about purpose, but I didn't expect him at this point to have that. And we talked about him and he's wanting to find his place. And that was, he's communicating things that I would have loved to have communicated in that climate. So when he said that, one of the things we came up with is, he's we call him MC, Mum's, MMC, Mum's Marvelous Creation. Yeah. So he always finds, so anytime he's feeling a little bit out of sorts, you're Mum's Marvelous Creation. So, just to stay inside of that. So the work, I know that doing the work on myself is definitely making a difference to, how I am as a mother and the work I do with my children. But again, it wasn't always like this. So let's talk about you and where you started, because your work is very, very expansive. So, maybe start with, where did you start?
Where did I start? With regard to the mother wound?
Yeah, and why? I mean, you got into this work.
I think the mother wound interest, let's say, it started off a fascination and interest was when I used to foster. And I used to foster really, really children who'd had undergone really complex trauma. And no matter what had happened to them, they always wanted to go back to their mothers. And I was fascinated with that. Why do they want to go back after all? Some had been actually physically burnt by their mothers, rejection, abandonment, all sorts of, really painful trauma, but they always wanted to go back to their mothers or find out why, why had their mother done this to them? Also, I did a lot of work with children who'd been adopted. And the same thing, quite a few adoptions break down because a child can't settle, because there's this sense of belonging and wanting to know about, the woman carried them for 9 months and they saw it as rejection, abandonment, or whatever had happened to them. So my interest was, what was it about mothers that made these really traumatized children want to still seek their mothers? So it started off by that as an interest, I would say, as a foster carer. And then as I myself developed and I studied, more and more my interest grew. So I had like the theoretical reason and had also experienced the practical, seeing these children lost and longing just to be loved by their mothers. And then when I looked deeper within my own family, my own circles, my own friendship groups, I also saw similar behavior, similar longing, similar yearning just to be loved or noticed or have their mother be attuned to them. So I'm guessing that is really where it started. And then when I qualified as a psychotherapist, a lot of my female clients, they presented with various issues, but as I work with them, and it's a bit like the onion, they just strip off the layers of the onion. Deep down was this relationship that they had with their mothers, or they didn't have with their mothers, or they wanted to have with their mothers. So as a mother, you know, the role or the relationship you have with your mother was just such a powerful, and it influenced you know, so many parts of our lives, our choices, our own relationship with friends, with even with ourselves, our relationship with food. So this figure, and you know the saying, there's a saying that the first man you fall in love with is your father. I haven't heard of the saying about the first woman. Is that your mother? Or do we just take it for granted? It's automatically assumed that our mother is the first woman who loves us. And so when that doesn't happen, you know, the outcome of that, or the impact of that, and as you said, not just on women, on men as well, but my specialism is working with women, you know, older daughters and even younger daughters now, because a lot of women, they find when their daughters become teenagers or the adolescent years, a lot of friction happens, and that's when breakdown, a lot of, you know, and the mothers sometimes remember themselves as that teenager or the adolescent. So a lot of it goes back to the mother's own trauma, or the many unresolved issues that the mother hasn't really dealt with. So for me, it's so important to know, and with some of us, it will never be healed. The mother wound, and they call it a wound because it is a wound. And for some women, it's a great big gaping wound. For some of us, it's a wound that has a scar. And I even would say some, you know, some of the scarring is actually quite ugly. It's keloid even, you know, I use that as for some people, it's this really ugly scarring. But it is a wound. It is definitely a wound. And this wound affects us emotionally, physically, and spiritually. So until you can actually confront that, face that, you will always be wounded. And this works helps you to find yourself. And for many women, it is about walking away and realizing that, you know, because once we start working with women, that, you know, the traits of their mother is narcissistic, very, very toxic. You know, lots of women, they were the scapegoat. It could be that they look like their fathers, and the fathers mistreated the mothers, so they're, you know, that's taken out on them. Various issues as to why mothers are emotionally unavailable to their daughters. But no matter what the reason is, that wound is still there. It's very painful, very, very, very painful to come to terms with your mother wasn't there for you. You know, and those of us who, you know, what you said about your son, that beautiful narrative that you gave, you know, as mothers, we're there, we're awake. If when our baby, you know, newborn, you're sleeping, but you're awake, you can hear that baby crying in your sleep, you jump up. Unavailable mothers, you know, the babies had to rock themselves to sleep. They weren't fed physically and emotionally fed. And the emotional not being fed is the one that does the damage more, as opposed to the physical. So in answer to your question, sister, it was really caring for and having to contain these foster children that were just terribly damaged, but still wanted the love of their mother. I just found that, wow, as a mothers, we're responsible for so much, we're accountable so much, and with some mothers, they don't actually know what they've done. They actually are unaware of what their behavior or their unattunement, the impact on their daughters and their children. And if you're not careful, if you're sort of walking around not even knowing you're wounded, or covering up the wound with a great big plaster, often then you repeat that behavior to your children, your daughters. So it is about
it's like that saying, you know, when people bleeding on people that haven't even hurt you.
Yeah, and also bleeding people hurt others. So if you don't even know you're bleeding, or you've covered up the wound before, you know, when we cut ourselves, you're not really supposed, depending on the wound, put the plaster on straight away. The wound needs to be healed first. So it is about recognizing that and going through, change, and awareness is painful. It's quite taboo talking, and there's a lot of shame talking about your mother. So a lot of it is very taboo still, not talking about it. But there are many, many daughters who Mother's Day is awful for them, and it's the most celebrated in the Western world, this perfect, loving mothers. Many can't even go in the shop and find a card that's got the true words, or they shut themselves away because it's so painful.
And I think, I also when I look at men and their mothers as well, I also think, I know from being in previous relationships and also dealing with conversations with men, often when their connection with their mother is fragmented, you find that there's like, you'd hear about conversation, something might come up, and it might be a case of them still needing a hug from their mum, or talking about men need hugs from their mums too, and they need it when they're men too. And I think people get to a point where they think, well, you know what, you've got to an age and you don't need to hug them. And I think that the impact of that can be very it can turn into toxic relationships where a man becomes quite needy, or he or he's over sexualized because he's needing that attention and demonstration of affection as well. So I think that there are lots of different ways in which this can impact on the male. I mean, I was thinking, as I was preparing for this, I was saying to myself, you know what, you as a parent, you never, as a mother, though I'm doing the work, I'll never know until maybe they're all adults and they'll all sit me down and tell me, well, this worked or this didn't work. Because, out of doing the work that you had, and I was looking at, what have I learned from the work that I did with you? And it taught me compassion. It taught me acceptance and understanding. I think, I'd read a book many years ago about toxic parents. The book was called Toxic Parents. And, it talks about forgiveness and even not forgiving at the end and all these kinds of things. And, and also having someone to support you with that. And at that time, I remember being supported to do that kind of work. But I just find that the work that you do around that, which is an area, it's a bit like, when I got my name. So those who know, I got my name many, many years ago when I was 22, Mut, which means mother of all mothers. And so I'm getting that name without no correspondence about what has been going on in my emotional world.
Yes.
And then I get this name whilst I'm pregnant with my first son. And then I go on to have a birth which is pain-free. And then later on, fast forward, become a doula. And that relationship with women alters. Because there was a thing with me and women. I mean, I know woman. If there's a room full of men and a room full of women, put me in a room full of men. That would be me. That was me. But over time, we're complex beings. Women are complex.
Very complex.
And I recognize, I'm fortunate, I have, sisters around me who will talk, we will all talk. If we've got, a mother issue, we will discuss it. We will hash it out within ourselves and with each other and, assist each other with it. Because we know. But I also, there's no judgment in that group of sisters that I speak to, because we recognize the power that we have. It's almost like your mother, it's like they become a nemesis. Because you're so far removed. As a middle child, and I was thinking about the Windrush generation and how they had to grow up fast and how they've had to deal with racism and what was the impact, the trickle effect on that. I know that my grandparents, if you like, are, they were Windrush. My mother is not a Windrush. She's, she's part of the Windrush babies, if you like. She's one of the, the afters. But but I also see, you know, what happened to that generation of people. Yeah.
Yeah.
People in my mother's generation, and how often a lot of them became quite wild. Yes, their consciousness was there, but they were quite wild. And I myself went through the whole conscious wild phase. Yeah. You know, you almost live out your parents' life unknowingly or knowingly. And but I think doing the work kind of put everything into perspective. You know, over time, you know, everything was here, different parts, that was that, got that. But then your work allowed to put everything into perspective in one spot. Yeah. And if you have, you know, we can do a lot of work on our finances and do a lot of work on, you know, our physical well-being in terms of like our, you know, our, what we eat, you know, our diet. You could be vegan all day long, but if your mind's not right, your mind's not right. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
You
And also your sense of who you are.
Go ahead.
It's also about your sense of who you are. And that feeling, you know, when we talk about belonging or becoming, they don't mean nothing if we don't feel loved. If we don't feel loved, and especially by the one person that should love us, you know, no matter what your achievement is or whatever, there is like that piece of the jigsaw that's always missing. And what you were saying about men, I mean, the impact now could be with lots of men. The other side of it is they adore their mum so much that no other woman can take the mother's place. I mean, that saying of mummy's boy. You know,
that's a dangerous game. That is a dangerous game as well. Exactly. That's a double-edged sword. Absolutely. So that no woman, and men, you know, if you're listening to this, it's also important to get in touch with your relationship with your mother, because, you know, there's this whole thing around gender wars right now. I mean, it's going on for a long time, but it's getting really kind of nasty and toxic. And nobody's, you know, I hear, and I don't try to get involved in those conversations, to be fair. Every now and again, and I gauge, and I usually, you know, compelled to shut it down. But I don't engage in some of those conversations, because often the conversation is about, okay, she did this, he did this, she did this, he did this, they're doing this, they're doing that, they're doing this. And nobody's really talking about the root. Nobody's looking at, okay, actually at the source of this could be, yeah. So if a man himself then, you know, has, you know, I adore my mother, no woman is good enough, then what's that relationship going to look like? Yeah. You know, and so, and, you know, and it might be the same with a woman who adores her father. Same thing. Like, we have to, everybody keeps talking about standards, but we have to look at realistic standards and ask ourselves, are our standards actually our own or someone else's? Yeah. And where are our standards really formed from? So, you know, when I looked at, you know, over time, doing some of the work that I did with you, it really helped me to get a sense of, okay, you know what? A lot of, when I look at my mother, I look at also her mother and what my mother said about her mother and what my grandmother said about her mother.
Yeah. Yes. And that is part of the work, to know your mother's history, your grandmother. How does your mother relate to the other females in the family, her own siblings? Has she got sisters, your aunts, all of those? And when you look back, you will see that the pattern is repeated throughout the generations until you decide that you're going to be the one to break the cycle. And you can only do that when you become aware of self and aware of the impact that this is having on you, on your life. And even some women have had to change how they parent their own children and their daughters.
Absolutely. I mean, I found that it's assisted me to firmly identify that older daughter syndrome. Because as a daughter, though I was the middle child, I was somewhat the oldest. Yeah. You know, it was like my role was shifted to the oldest without, you know, it's a bit like getting promoted in a job and you're not getting paid for it. You know, it was like that. And so a lot of that meant that, you know, impacted obviously on my childhood, meant I had to grow up really quickly.
Yeah.
It meant that sometimes I wasn't clear as to you know, had so much responsibility, yeah, that at times I felt like, well, okay, you know what, am I still a child or am I still an adult? Am I an adult or my child? It was that kind of thing, you know what I mean? It was trying to make this decisions and choices inside of that, yeah, and not getting, whilst all of that was going on, and my mum being my mum, emotional intelligence wasn't at the forefront in in our family. So therefore, decisions were being made and punishments were being dished out, without reasoning, without the reasoning that comes with it, and the, you know, why this happened, and etc., etc. So you're working it out, and again, you know, those kinds of things actually assist me going forward. Like, it makes me more astute. It helps me to see like the subtle nuances of certain things that other people won't maybe pick up. It helps me inside my work. Yeah, it really assists me to help families when I see subtle nuances that I can help them identify, and therefore they can start going to work on it. I found that it opened up dialogue and conversations with my siblings as well. You know, we're in the same household, and, you know, three children could be in the same household and have a completely different experience.
Completely different.
And so we started to kind of like, it helped us to have a dialogue around it. It was quite a painful conversation, but we did it. You know what I mean? I had a conversation with my brother, I had a conversation with my sister, in different ways. You know, some of the work, that I talk about, and I also want to shout out to a sister, Phoenix, and you know, and I had a reading a few months ago, and she was talking about, you know, breaking generational patterns in real time. So I just want to shout you out, sis. So, you know, I recognize that the work I'm sent here to do, I can't speak for anyone else, but I'm sent here to do, is definitely intergenerational healing work. Hence, it, you know, everything for me has sort of made sense. Children, babies, mothers, fathers, grandparents, all of these different things. It's like almost I get to see how my life has been orchestrated for this. So I don't. There was a time when I'd fight all of that and have a lot of resistance and have a lot of, you know, and I think, you know, people talk about angry black woman syndrome and all this kind of thing else, but I think resolving stuff inside yourself with your mother, whether you're in connection with your mother or not, allows that, whatever that is, that resentment, that anger, it helps to start to break it down.
It does.
So, I think, you know, and I think, you know, what we covered a lot in that time. And I think, you know, some of the things that I remembered we covered was about, you talked about women projecting their hurt on their children.
Also with that, actually, if you think a lot, depending on obviously how old you are, but a lot of our mothers, you know, brought with them their pain from the Caribbean. I mean, I'm from Jamaican, you know, parentage, and we know that, you know, that because of slavery and the history, the harshness of parenting. So they brought, you know, and many of them weren't cuddled, they weren't hugged. There was, you know, they didn't have time for that. They just had children, and they brought with them, because you can only be a parent. We parent how we've been parented, and then they came here. You know, as you said about the Windrush and everything else, and what they had to go through, you know, the work, the racism and all the other traumas. And then they were just having children after children after children. And some of them, you know, when they came over on the boats, just for safety, they had children with men who they didn't even really love. And then the result of that union was children. And so there's, you know, when you sort of really go into it, what they brought with them was what they knew. Very, very harsh parenting.
I mean, that's, you know, it really does make sense. And so again, we have to keep going back to the source. And, you know, you do intergenerational work, and those who know, you know, the work of Dr. Joy DeGruy, post-traumatic slave syndrome. I remember I remember when I first met her, that was it for me. Yeah. And it was in 2006. And she said, and she inscribed, I mean, people inscribe books all the time, but in her book, she inscribed to me and my son, you are the greatest hope from the future. And you know, I say that to all of us, yeah, because we are, when we're doing this kind of work, we're shifting, we're breaking generational patterns from our future. Yeah. My middle son, you know, who knows, when he has a middle child, he might be talking about his marvelous creation. We're already doing it. Yeah. And we've got to be consciously doing that work. We're not always going to get it right. We're not perfect, you know, but we're going to, you know, like you're saying, our parents, if you like, and our grandparents and our forefathers, you know, they did the best with what they knew.
They did.
And we are, you know, we're all still learning about our stuff. Yeah, we're still unpacking it. You know, it's a journey. No, none of us have made it. Yeah. But, you know, I remember you talked about, you know, looking at our earliest memories, you know, with our mother, you know, positive or negative, you know, childhood stories, you know, that had representation to our childhoods as well. And, you know, and we would also, you know, if you don't know how the structure of the sessions would go, you know, we'd always end with a, you know, a kind of clearing, a checking in and a breathing. So, you know, it was a very nurturing space. Yeah. And it's a confidential space. So, you know, I'm interested in, you know, creating another group for our sisters. Yeah. So DM me if you want to get involved in that. It is a confidential space. We're not here to chat each other's business. It's not that party. Yeah. This is real work, heart work. Yeah. So if you're on this, message me. But yeah, I wanted to kind of talk about, you know, you talked about how you started and you moved on with some other areas. You know, you've done, you know, worked in areas where domestic violence was a theme, or, you know, controlling relationships. Yeah, these kinds of things, which, if you like, you're talking about family structures, and if you're talking about narcissistic parents, you know, you can easily fall into, I know I've been in that, fall into relationships where there's familiarity. And you haven't realized that there's a connection. It's familiar. It's not that you really want that person. It's that person's behavior is familiar, and you also know how to handle it, or you think you know how to survive it.
It feels safe for you. You know, it feels safe for you because that's what you know. And it's a bit like, again, you know, like-minded. You get together with like-minded people. So this is what you know. You naturally just gyrate to that. Yeah, you naturally just.
Yeah, it's like a rhythm. It just is familiar, and you know, and I think only when you identify, and it's taken me some time, but to truly identify it. But over time, when, you know, where I've identified it, I can, you know, I've taken the time to now see, okay, that was the connection. Yeah. That's why I chose that person. There's something familiar. And your course allows one to see that as well. Yeah. I think that your work really establishes, like, you know, the heart work, the kind of unraveling, you know, pulling off the Band-Aid. It's, you know, remove the veil. It's, you know, it's the work that needs to be there. So, you know, tell us a little bit about some of the work, you know, going forward. You've done some work around, we talked about that, maybe you've talked about families in terms of fostering, but also you're talking about elderly and neglect. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, as we get older, again, the menopausal age is quite a significant change in life. Hence, you know, they call it the change. And that's, you know, we're now with a lot of women, again, depending on where you are in your life as to how the menopause is going to impact your mindset. And then your mindset can influence the physical impact of the menopause. So I do a lot of work with menopausal women. And again, it's about knowing who you are and where you are. And again, that belonging. Lockdown affected lots and lots of people. There was loss. So loss isn't just about, bereavement as in death. Grief, we can, we can grieve over the loss of freedom, the loss of choice. Many people lost their jobs, lost friendships. With the menopause, it's the loss, women can see as the loss of youth, not being able to reproduce again. A lot of them with the mindsets is about, am I wanted? Am I worthy? Am I even a sexual being anymore? So after that, so there's a lot of work that I do with menopausal women. And then after the menopause, we become the elderly or the mature generation. And with all of the milestones or the decades in life, how you face it is depending on your mindset. So with the elderly and Black, again, there's a lot of elderly, Black in our community, and they're also lost. They're also, looking for something. They're lost youth, or their purpose. What's their purpose? There is also as well, but although it is slightly changing, the breakdown in the community, the lack of togetherness. So being elder. Lots of members of our elderly community now, they're having to go to nursing homes, because the reality of it is, if you're working and you've got your own children, you may not have a spare room. That was quite taboo. And a lot of, older people or mature who are then having to face that decision with their parents now. Lots of anxiety, lots of pain, and again, is it breaking with culture? Again, from depending on what your culture is, you cared for your elderly parents. There was lots of generations in one household. That's not possible in England or where we are now. Even, going even back to the pandemic, the last time I mentioned it, when people died, they couldn't give them the funerals that was cultural. And so there's still a lot of anxiety, shame, and pain that their loved ones were laid to rest, not in the way that they would have wanted to have been able to have sent their loved ones off. But my oldest client was a woman, and she was 95. And when she came to me, I had to wonder with her, well, why at 95? And she said to me, I want to know myself before I die. I want to know myself before I die. And I think it's so important when you know yourself, when you really know who you are, know your purpose, walking in your own shoes, have that change of mindset, everything else you can handle. But when you don't know, all you're doing is you can mask, because we all do. We don't disassociate with parts of ourselves, parts of our lives. We make those choices. But when you know yourself, so it is about knowing your history, knowing, your mother's history, your father's history, going when you can. Talk now, communicate now. Those who have got parents, talk. Break that cycle, because when they're gone, they're gone. But it gives you that foundation of knowing. It's as if you might have pieces of the jigsaw, but the jigsaw could be unfinished unless you ask those questions, you break that cycle. And it's like lots of people now, they're going and get that DNA test, aren't they, to know where they come from. And that I've got this in the Congo, and all the things, so that's the physical, your DNA, but this emotional part of you as well. You need to know who you are, and sometimes it's often very painful knowing. It's not just an easy ride, and that's why the groups are very supportive. The women need to feel safe that they're not being judged, that they can share, that they can be contained. It's not, there's been sobbing, and I mean that sobbing when that sound is coming from your stomach and you're looking around and then you realize it's coming from me. When you're authentic and you bear your all, not being selective, but you can only do that once you find if you believe you're in a safe space. So all our spaces are safe and contained, so you can really find who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And because what I always say, the blessed ones are the ones who get old. Not everybody's going to be old or elderly.
True. I think and you touched on DNA tests, and in my story, you talk about knowing your ancestry, but I think going back to what you said, your emotional history is just as important.
Just as important.
Because I remember my grandmother, she's Guyanese, and she would not talk about Guyana. Like, whatever went down, we don't know. That's what spurred me myself to actually go and have a DNA test from her side of the family, because I was like, she told us fragments of certain things, like we know that our great grandfather, if you like, that side of the family is Nigerian, so we know that. But she would not connect the dots. And she'd go from 0 to 100 emotionally if you mentioned Guyana. So whatever went on, when she left. Yeah. And she never talks about that, but she cut off, this person and that person and this person and that person when she came over.
Yes.
So that indicates, the emotional history. And then my mother experiencing my grandmother the way she was. And my grandmother was, again, it shows up in the book Toxic Parents. It talks a little bit about when your children become adolescents. And I think we're on my mother's side is mainly females, if you like. It's very female heavy. So, again, all of us having a menstrual cycle, not tuning in with each other per se. Not really knowing when my mum's is or when, my sister's is, we're also having our own. Instead of connecting in that time or using that time to, to bond or discuss or engage. So, and, again, you're at an age where, you've gone from, you've got your little body, your tiny little body, and then your body starts to change shape. And, the elders notice that. You don't notice it. But the elders notice that your body's changing, and then the comments get made. Oh, well, and it's little, it's subtle, and it's it's in jest. But there's something inside of that. There's something actually rooted in that, and it starts to then take shape and hold by the time I'm about 15, 16. So then, fast forward, and I'm at university, I'm doing my own thing now, and I'm, all I do is work and rave at this point. Work, rave, and study. In
regard to the adolescence, if I could just interject there, in my opinion, a lot of that again came from those of us who've got Caribbean ancestry, because when the girls became, their breasts started perking, then they were taken by massa.
That's right.
And so the mothers would have lost control, and it was actually quite frightening for mothers when they saw their daughters
children. That's right.
Yes, and I think that again, is been carried. So when now puberty starts, fast forward now in the Western culture here in England, and often, I remember I was told, so you think you is woman now?
That one.
And so that one, because it's that threat. Oh, she's going to go off now, but there's always if you sort of go back and research that, and then that, because going backwards, they saw their daughters Once
That's right.
their little bodies started forming, that was it. Master's property now. Yeah.
So it's like underneath that there is a underlying fear,
Mm.
but because here we are fast forward into the future, we don't have the language, we don't have the circumstances
Yes.
and the language to identify what that really is.
Exactly.
And
so
then
that's why we need to talk about it. That's why and that's why, yes, it's painful. It's painful to think, but we need to, once you become aware and that's why, and you can talk about it. So instead of there being this friction, this unspoken friction, and as awful as this may sound, there was competition, whereas Massa wouldn't want mother no more. He'd want the young daughter.
Right.
So that's why when this two woman in the house can't, and and all of this challenging with teenagers. But if we can talk about it, face it, we're aware of it, and realize the impact that it's had through the generations, then we can start changing. But if this still remains this unspoken thing,
I would agree. I think there has to be a shift now. We are, relationships are a detrimental state. Yeah, we've got all sorts of different things. Yes, we've got the gender wars going on. We've got other gender conversations, agendas going on, which again are penetrating, if you like, the real and obscuring the view, if you like, of what's really going on. All of these things are a distraction. To what's actually going on at the source of it. And so we just it's a self, if you like, fulfilling prophecy. It carries on. People are there shouting off about men are this, women are that, men are this, women are that, and that's what it's gonna kind of like transpire into. People are coming together less and less. It's becoming more difficult with the, if you like, social media and things like that, I think. But also because people are not connecting, and it doesn't matter. I always say it doesn't matter how much technology we have, we'll always need human connection. And we want to have authenticity in our relationships. You've got to unpack some stuff. You have to be prepared to have a level of vulnerability going forward, and a level of trust. It's not this is your story, and then it's like, okay, you're gonna go tell the world about it, etc. It's not that. We all have scars. We all have it.
Every one of us.
And I remember, when one of the things I wrote down in my notes when I was doing one of your workshops, something that was said, I think it was something you said, we don't talk about it to survive it. So it's like, we're not even, if we just discard it, dismiss it, we can survive. It's when we have to do the work and unpack some of that, that we feel fragile, and that we feel like, we feel exposed, and often don't know really what to do with those feelings. And so that's why I invited you on for our audience this evening, because this work is accessible to all of us. It is. And accessible to our community. And we when we look at post-traumatic slave syndrome, this is what it looks like. Some people were scathed in some way, and some people weren't. And if you weren't, there's a bigger purpose for not. So I recognize it over time. Okay, that's been, as soon as I came across that work, everything's kind of put, all the pieces of the puzzle fit together. When I came across post-traumatic slave syndrome, and then tying it into this, I can totally see, okay, well, there's this link and there's this link, and I know about this story and how that went down, and how even my father was treated, or my mother was treated, and and how they don't have, their parents didn't have the language or the the emotional intelligence to express it. They were coming from their own frustration, their own pain, and in the Windrush generation, they were sucking up having to suck up the racism, and look after the same set people that are racist. NHS staff, my grandmother was a nurse. So, and, they were supposed to be here for king, queen and country. So what were they supposed to say? They'd given up everything. Some of them burnt their bridges. So what now?
Yeah.
In a situation like that, what they're supposed to do, they got to suck it up and get on with it. But again, not having certain language means it's going to show up in how you might raise your children, or how, what you experience with them.
Yeah.
Can easily be like a kick the cat situation, dad's upset with mum is upset with the children kick the cat.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It can easily be a situation like that. And I remember, what these experiences allowed me to kind of like, I suppose, accept who I am as a person, but also, again, going back to assisting families and assisting my own family. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So it's a tricky situation. Is at the time when I was sort of early on, a few years ago, I was very much like, resentful of the fact that I'm like the eldest. Yeah.
Right.
Even if I don't want to be the eldest, I'm the eldest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And now I've recognized that position and what that looks like. And so I can step back from certain things, and people will, if there's something they need to come to me about, they'll just come to me when it's time. But I won't necessarily have to be around in the same way, because they've put me in that position before. I'll be like, why are they coming to me all the time? My sister's there, but it's, again, my mind was open from quite a young age as to, okay, what's going on here in the family dynamic. I was always kind of trying to unpack that. And so it's a natural progression, really. It's like the person with the most insight or the most wisdom, or the most knowledge becomes almost like the elder, no matter what age.
Yeah.
And so I recognize, okay, that's me on that side of the family. Yeah. And so I rest in it now, but I wasn't at ease with it. And I think some of your work also assisted me to be like, okay, I really get it. And also, how will now that I accept it, how will I use that energy? How will I, obviously use it for good, but how will I not be drawn in to certain dynamics? Somebody talking about someone else, or somebody is upset with somebody else and it's trivial or petty. I'm not engaging in that. I'll give you a very quick solution. You either want it or you don't. You give
the tools to let go, because sometimes you have to let go. Sometimes it is a case of letting go.
And I think one of the things I've learned about doing work on myself, and is that when you're not doing the work on yourself, you're also co-signing others' behavior by default.
Yes.
By not doing that work on yourself. Because you're saying, well, okay, what they did is what they did. I don't want to look at myself, so I don't want to look at them. I don't want to judge them. I don't want to look at myself, so I'm not going to look at them. And you co-sign others. And that's how you get a lot of abandoned children, men not being in the home, men moving with other men who haven't got their children around them, and they casually, moving with these men, instead of holding them accountable, and actually looking at, okay, well, what was your, it takes something for men to be saying, well, okay, what was your relationship with your father like?
Yes.
What was your relationship with your mother like? That what is it that, has you not really be there? What shows up? What does it trigger? Like, those are the conversations, those kind of levels of conversations, rather than surviving it. It's about moving to that position of, engaging in it, pulling off the bandage, and learning to thrive in it. Like, if we understand and understand that we all suffer with post-traumatic slave syndrome, then it's important for us to operate from a space of compassion and understanding, I say.
Yes. Yeah, I totally agree 100% with that. But you need to be aware to be able to do that, don't you?
Absolutely. And so this is what this work is about. The work that you do is very much about unpacking it, getting to the awareness. It's not going to be pretty. You might cry, you might need tissue, your bogies might come out. Yeah, it's gonna it's a purge. Okay,
Yes,
it's
it's
a
a
purge.
purge.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a purge.
definitely. Yeah.
I just want to hail out some people in the chat. Yeah. We've got this evening, we've got Emmanuel Briggs. Hello, everyone. We've got Pregnancy Without Fear. She says, good evening. She's one of my mentors. There is no manual for mother and fatherhood. We develop our titles as mother and father from our experiences as to how we were raised as children. Lots of things repeat. It's the cycle. Yeah. It's cyclical. Yeah, absolutely. And we've got James O in the building. You were here last week. Give thanks, peace and love. Bam, just checking in. Sis. Essential topic. Thank you, sis. Intergenerational healing is key. We've got Next Gen in the building as well. Good evening. Good evening. Next Gen says these levels of consciousness should be made available to Black and global majority professionals who are then made responsible for children, understanding of who we are before we impact the next generation. Absolutely. So thank you for those conversations as well. Thanks for staying in the chat and staying in this conversation. It's a powerful conversation. I mean, I suppose I've learned to assist myself with this knowledge, and I hope that other women will see the benefit of this, and really kind of reach out to the work that you do. Sisters, don't sleep on this one. This is not one to sleep on. This is the work. You want to know what the work looks like? This is it. This is some of the hardest work I've done. I've done a lot of work. I've been doing personal development for 20 years now. More than 20 years. I started in 2001. And this is some of the most powerful work I've done in this area, and dealing with the source, because a lot of areas don't tackle the root, your foundation often. And you go for counseling and these kind of things, and you can spin you around, and and going through the same things over and over again, and discussing the same thing over and over again, and how it made you feel. And then you have CBT, which might help you to like move on and find ways in which to move on from it. But from things. But I think you can't. There's a lot of things you can't sort of move on from without identifying the source.
Yeah.
And we have a responsibility to do this kind of work for our children. If not for ourselves, we do it for our children. It's important that we do this kind of work, because we don't want to see our children making certain mistakes or having certain patterns of behavior that we don't find desirable, maybe in ourselves or in a family member, and then it's going somewhere else. So I'm really keen for our sisters to really engage in that. I know that you also do retreats as well. So tell us a little bit about some of the courses you do, some of the the retreats that you do as well. What's your services? What's available?
Okay. Well, the retreats, I do a Healing the Mother Wound retreat, and that is based in Broadstairs. I've got a beautiful haven, I would call it, in Broadstairs, which I'm sure you'll put on the chat, so if those who want to look it up, it's all on my website. And what we found, why the retreats are more successful, because instead of just having a one-day workshop or a few hours workshop, you're actually going away from a Friday to a Sunday or a Friday to a Monday, and then we can go really deep. It's by the sea, we have grounding. So that's the first part of the awareness. So you're grounding, we have reflection, we have rejuvenation and repairing, all the R's, and there is a lot of rest. It's not nicey. So if you're looking for a nicey retreat, the space is nice.
This isn't it.
Yeah, the space is nice. The sea obviously is nice. The sunsets, the moonshine, everything beautiful, because you're going back to the source. So just as the mother is the source, or nature, the earth, the sea is the source, but the content is powerful. It involves, it's very creative. So we work with clay, we work with sand, we work with even drama. So it's not just because sometimes you can't find the words to actually express your feelings, but if you do it in a creative way, you can mold your, even with Play-Doh, we've had sisters creating their mothers with Play-Doh and speaking to the mother. And also, even if your mother has passed, that doesn't matter. We can still work with the mother wound for mothers that have passed. We release. There's lots of things there's even liberation. And it's, again, you get as much or as little as you want. But as I've said, it is deep and it is very complex. And again, the food is nice, and we have our own homemade chef. So it's because, again, eating is, again, a very powerful thing. The relationship with the mother wound as well has an impact with many people on food. For some of us, food was used as a punishment. Food was taken away, or we was fed too much food, or a certain type of food makes us remember things in our childhood. We look at the inner child. The inner child, again, is that little person, the little me that's inside us that perhaps wasn't fed, that was never allowed to play, but wants to come out. So even with some of our behavior as adults, we can be behaving like that, the terrible twos, that tantrum. So we go really, really deep. And because it's over a period of time, it's much more effective than, like a few hours, or although everything is important. So I won't take away from, from those who, the one-day workshops, or even we meet regularly online, or regularly once a month. But yes, so we do retreats for healing the mother wound. There's lots of, I also do anxiety retreats, grief and loss retreats, menopause retreats, so various retreats. But that's out of London. And for those of you who know Broadstairs, it's a really beautiful place.
Lovely. And so what kind of if people wanted to do like their monthly courses, maybe give people a little bit of a synopsis on what we would cover in your monthly courses, that the ones that I had attended.
So there's a monthly online support group for healing the mother wound, and that's from 7:30 to 9:30. So there's an hour and a half. You get to meet. It's online. You get to meet, other queens. We call ourselves queens in healing as such. So there is some theory, psychoanalytical theory that's brought in as to why, we go a bit in attachment. It's not heavy stuff though, but it actually reveals certain, well, this is why I behave like this, or Sister, you mentioned about you being the third child. So also where you
the middle child
of how many? Middle child of how many?
On my mother's side, the middle child of 3.
Right. So, depending on where you are, that has an impact in your behavior, or even, your mother's behavior towards you. But also, it also depends if you was a favored child. So if you was a middle child and a favored one, then different impact. If you was a middle child and not so favored one, so we look at all different aspects, psychological aspects in that. It is an hour and a half, and also you get a chance to share if you want to. There's a lot of outpouring. And lots of things resonate with those who attend those sessions. So it's not, I wouldn't actually call it a course. I would call it more a meetup, and a monthly meetup where you can talk and share and feel contained. And go away with learning, with awareness of self. Yeah. And then that,
I think, look, don't underestimate the impact, because I've personally, I know that I've shared it with sister friends, and I'm a person like, I'm not going to share this unless I really think it's, got some substance.
Yes.
And so, the hour and a half is very jam-packed, actually.
Yes.
Yeah. And, covering lots of different, I was going through some of my notes today, we're looking at, drawing different parts of our childhood on a graph, different parts, peaks and troughs in our childhood. I remember, if I was writing a card to myself, what would I say? Like, you're always left with an exercise, that kind of like stays with you. Yeah. Exercises is usually 2 or 3 exercises inside a session, and then we have an opportunity to share it and and express it. And I think a lot of us are left kind of it can leave you quite raw. I've definitely been raw at the end of it, but again, you've contacted I've been in contact with you after, what I mean, where I had been raw, but also I found that they, once you get over the rawness of it, at different points, but generally I'd find that, it's really kind of opened up. And even if I've had a cry or, it's been an emotional trigger, it's kind of like,
yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Well, it's actually like giving birth. Giving birth to a new you. So after the pain and everything else and the labor, you've birthed a new you. For sure. That's how it feels. Though it's once a month, that month carries what I learn in that month carries through to the next month. Yes.
Yes. Certainly. So if you're thinking, well, God, it's only once a month, it's potent.
Yes. Thank you.
Potent. So that hour and a half gives you, it gives you the certain tools. It gives you a lot of reflection between now and the next session. It's just enough, actually, because you cover so much. You need somewhere to communicate. I often have, my sister, I'll speak to my sister friends after and share, what I learned and what have you. And, they're like, yeah, they're feeling it. And so, it's very potent. It's very powerful. And it's at times it's kind of hard hitting depending on what's going on for you. You know what I mean? It's like it's very person centered. No two people will have the same share. No two people will have the same experience and impact. And so we're all learning from each other about that impact. And it's giving us the compassion to deal with each other. Yeah, certainly assists. I think it has the impact of softening women if women find themselves to be quite hard women. Yeah. For those hard sisters, hard back sisters out here, you are. Yeah. And I love you, but I know that beyond that, that, there's a softness. All women come with
like taking the mask off, isn't it? Taking that mask, that maybe the hard mask or that strong, because behind that mask there's a softness.
Absolutely. And so it helps you identify that. It helps you to unpack that so that you can, if you like, you get to feel your true self inside of that. You get to feel like, okay, I don't have to carry that. Like an invisible suitcase. It is. I can let that go. And even if I release tears, it's like a libation, it's a purge, and it's safe and the space is right. And the work gets done, and it lightens your load. As you do it, it really lightens the load. So if women are struggling with relationships with women, other relationships, I would definitely say get involved. If you've got a mother-daughter dynamic, definitely say be in contact with you. I'd say also if you've got intergenerational things that are unresolved, a lot of abuses took place. Let's not pretend that it was all roses. Coming out of the Windrush generation, there was a lot of abuses, sexual abuses, other abuses going on, and so those things have, we can actually see when we fast forward now into what's going on with young Black boys specifically. Conversations like this with their fathers, or healing that father wound, is not getting dealt with, and these children are, if you like, imploding. These children are attacking each other. They're attacking themselves. They're attacking the unhealed parts of themselves. There's no communication. There's no language for what it is they're feeling. They're out on road and they've got the language. They've got all the all the words and all the buzzwords. But how do they identify with these things that have happened, and what does that have them do, because they've once, you know, it's like when you identify a feeling, and if you're not comfortable identifying your feelings, you know, you could easily go into fight or flight mode.
Yes, definitely. Yes,
And
it's a case of how do they identify with self?
Absolutely. And that's what we, you know, you can see with a lot of our young people is, you know, that fight or flight response that's happening. Yeah. And so there's a genocide, if you like, happening with our young people with inside themselves right now. And if, you know, you'll find that the young girls are, you know, maybe self-harming. Yeah, there's a lot of that going on. Yeah.
Yes.
But pain has to go somewhere. That's what we're not seeing. It has to live somewhere. So where does our pain live? And if it does live somewhere, where does it show up? And if it shows up, you know, what can we do to have it, you know, healed so it no longer shows up? So for me, I'm always keen to do this kind of work on myself. This was perfect during the lockdown. You know, we all had a chance to kind of spend time reflecting. But this is work that, you know, is very close to my heart. Given I have to, you know, I work with women, I work with mothers who may not have, you know, a mother figure around them, or a sister around them. So my role, sister mother, if you like, becomes an important factor inside of my work, because I know sometimes women they're not getting nurtured by any other woman. Yeah. They're not getting nurtured by the women that matter, maybe from their friends, but the women that matter, like their elders or their, you know, who they expected. Sometimes you find that a woman will struggle with her mother, you know, everything's quite, you know, doing really well, their relationship's quite good, until they get to the point where a woman is pregnant.
Yeah.
And she's, you know, and she wants to deliver her baby in a way that's not, you know, is frowned upon by her mother. Yeah, she might want a natural delivery, or she might want to have a home birth. And that's when you start to see a mother's trauma around childbirth.
Yeah.
Their mothers, if you're not aware of that, that's your mother's trauma of her own experience in childbirth. My mum's told me about what childbirth was like for her. So it's not a surprise that, again, these are all subtle nuances. That's why how you enter the world matters. And my mum spoke about how, you know, we came into the world and what it was like for her. And, you know, and I think that those kinds of things impact on her bond.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, who talks about mothers with postnatal depression, you know, in the women's generation? Mothers were still experiencing it, but, you know, they had to push through, or they behaved in a particular way, you know, as a form of resentment. Like you going back to what you said about projecting your hurt onto your children. Yeah, you know, it's first nature, if you like. So, you know, I think the work that you do is really valuable. I think, you know, if there's an opening for men, if you're listening, I think it's important for men to do this kind of work as well. Father work, it's really key. Yeah, if we really want to kind of like be satisfied within ourselves, we have to do the work. We have to identify what the issues are with our father, identify what our issues are with our mother. So at least we're able to, you know, set a new framework for ourselves. Because without that framework, it's kind of like, you know, you just, you know, you're like leaves, you know, blowing in the breeze, you know, whichever way it's going to take you. Okay, this happens, triggered by that, that's going to happen. Oh, I'm triggered by that, so I'll do that, I'll make that choice, you know, depending on that person said this and said that. You're moving.
Well, without a framework, you're lost, aren't you? You're just lost. Yeah.
And so, you know, your work really represents that work, that inner work, that most needed work at our core. So I was really grateful that that work came along at that time. Yeah, it's work that I found really valuable and would still find valuable. And I know that there are women in the world and men in the world, who want to resolve stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, some people don't. There are going to be people in the world who just haven't got, you know, they have got no interest in it. But don't expect to be happy at your core. Just don't. Yeah, you can fake it, but just don't expect to be happy at your core unless we're doing the work. Yeah, we can be satisfied, we can try to be content, but until we identify some of these things that are, you know, wired from very young.
Yes.
Yeah, we can't forget that these, as you know, our internal wiring, you know, from 0 to 7 matters. Yeah. And then usually it, you know, a trauma usually takes place, usually, not always, but usually takes place, some major life event takes place when you're in your teens. And then again, these things are not, they're identified as this happened, but they're not identified as to what we made those things mean, and what we've done with what we've made it mean.
Yes.
Do you see what I mean? And you know, what our life looks like because we identified it like this, instead of, you know, unpacking it where it will actually heal. You know, we're moving around with a lot of anger, men towards women, women towards men. This angry. The conversations are angry. You know, when you hear them, you know, this gender wars thing, it's just shocking. I'm just like, when did this happen? Yeah, you know, 10 years ago it wasn't like this. 20 years ago, you know, our grandparents weren't thinking about this. Now, a lot of our parents did come together, you know, like you're saying, came together, had babies with men they didn't know, just, you know, again, under whatever the circumstances were. You know, we often forget that, you know, it was normal for, you know, I was at one point raised by my grandmother, and it was normal for you to live with your grandmother or not live with your mother at all, or whatever. It was a very normal setup. Do you know what I mean? And with that meant, you know, yes, you're getting the wisdom of your elder, which I think that was great for me, but I think also you're getting, you know, the second coming of what it was like for your mum. So you're like, but it helps you, well, it helped me to understand what my mum dealt with in her teens.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, and so, you know, it's that they don't know that they're triggered and wired and moving on autopilot and impulsive and reactive. They're not operating from that level of intelligence, emotional intelligence. So yes, we have to give them grace, but I think when we also start looking at those areas and identifying it and working on it, it means we're not co-signing. Yeah, and that's a really important factor, is not to co-sign. Yeah, by doing nothing, co-signing is like enabling.
It is.
So yeah, I really again, I'm just gonna just flash up the website again. So, you know, thank you so much for coming into the space.
My pleasure.
And sharing the work. And I just wanted to also I wanted to be this kind of a conversation where, you know, I was sharing what I got from it, because it's all well and good you coming on here, but it's about experience. And so, you know, I have to do the work in order to share that work with you. And I wanted to share that work with you. I wouldn't share it before the work was done. Yeah, I wanted to do some of the work, family, and then share it with you. And here we are. So I really appreciate that. And I appreciate you coming into the space. So by all means, go onto our website, you know, book a space. You know, if you want to set up a space, sisters only space, and then let me know. And we can set up a space. I'll happily, you know, communicate with sisters who want to really kind of get down and do the work. Yeah, no playing. If you're here to play,
no nicey.
no, nicey. No. That you got to do the work. You got to put in the work. So I'm just going to go to the comments a minute. Okay, lovely. Black Next Gen says, bang on for our boys, men and ourselves, looking for champions of our community's wounds. Will reach out. Dr. Sister Sandra, Sister Doctor, and greetings, Queens. It's great to see this work being illuminated. Thank you for this. Healing intergenerational legacy work. Remain blessed. Thank you, sis. And again, and you see, those who know me know also that because of the mother work that I've been doing over the years, it means that sisters like Sister Dr. Sandra and other elders. Some of you have seen, Griot Chinieri. Some of you have seen Amashade. These are my mothers. Yeah. Fortunately, I remember in one of your sessions talking about stories. Yeah. And Rapunzel used to be my story, used to be my thing. And one, it was about the locks, and I used to have really long locks, and I think there was a link between that and the locks, just and the freedom. It's all about using the hair, right? And so and the freedom and escape and stuff like that. And it's those stories now shift, like in looking at their kind of like the construct of how I and the associations I made with that. Allow me now to kind of like look at that story not as okay, this is the story of freedom, but look at the story now for what it is. Recently we bought Kwanzaa, we bought a black version of Rapunzel, beautiful, beautiful, and it was lovely to read it, and I was like reading it, and I was and I was like, oh, you know what, I thought I'd have, because every time I came across that book there would be kind of a thing before I identified it. I couldn't work out what the thing was, but there was a thing. And then recently over the Kwanzaa, I bought the book again, and a beautiful version of the book. And I just thought, and I could read it like a book. I could read it without that in the space of what I made that mean and how that, and what the representation of that was. So, I want to say thank you for the work. The work works.
And it is about making, what you've described is about making the connection.
Yes.
And then when you make that connection, the awareness will start.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I just want to thank you so much for sharing that. The work is really important, to our mothers, to our sisters, and, and our brothers and our sons and our husbands and our fathers. So, pass this on. If you can get anything from this conversation, by all means, start to look at the work. Let's do the work. Our community needs this. Our children are in crisis. Our children need us to do the work. We're an emergency state of affairs, family.
We are.
So I just want to say that thank you so much for coming in. It was beautiful to have you. I can't wait to connect with you again. And I'm just going to put you at the back there while I complete. All right. And and we'll catch up. But thank you again.
Thank you. Bye. Bye, everyone. Bye-bye.
That was lovely. That was so lovely. I don't know how it was for you. Well, the comments have been beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you for being so lovely and compassionate inside of the comments. This work is really important. And I'm, we could all hide the work we're doing on ourselves, but it makes no sense. We've got to do the work. And, when we're doing the work, we can share it with others. So that's what we're doing here. And I just want to kind of complete as well, because I remember actually during the lockdown as well, Dr. Joy DeGruy actually did I think it was called the Essence Festival. And she did a workshop on, not having support. There's no help or support after post-traumatic slave syndrome. She actually mentions that in this workshop. But she also, she said something that really struck with me as well. Said, be the healing that you want to see. And so, I just really want to engage in our relationships with ourselves. There's time to we can easily hide behind social media and all those wonderful things. They're there and they assist us in the way that they do, and and it's fun, okay, but the real work needs to be done on the inside. And that's what this work's about. So thank you so much. I won't be here next week. I will be here the week after, and we'll have a lovely show for you in a couple of weeks' time. And still along these lines, in terms of conversation. So, without further ado, as always, we say, if you ain't got nothing, you ain't got kush. Until next time.